Hello, spider friends. If you were with me a few minutes ago when I originally tried to do this, I'm sorry, I'm going to end up repeating myself because my stream broke down for some reason. Um, so, let's start again. Um, Tonight we're doing a bit of a different video. I've just been to see It Chapter 2 at the cinema. And as I was leaving the theatre, the lady at the cinema asked me, was it any good? And my response in my head was, this is far too complicated for me to explain to you. And the response I actually gave her was, it was fine. Um, so I'm going to sort of use some pops that I have to help me retell what happens in the movie, um, and explain why I think both the original miniseries and the film are a little smidge lackluster. Um, it's not The Shining. See, here's the problem: is that Stephen King is a man I respect incredibly in a very, very large amount, but I think it's pretty evident that the characters of the Losers Club don't actually have a personality to speak of. And when I explain this to you with the pops that I have chosen to represent the characters, you will sort of understand. See, I thought, right, Ben. Ben's characteristic trait is he's fat. So I chose Wreck It Ralph. Really, that's all there is to Ben. Ben is fat. What do we know about Ben? We know he's fat. We know he's poor, but we know he's fat. Um, what about Richie? Richie has glasses. And Richie is a comedian. Really, I just went with Grunkle Stan because it kind of does actually look like Richie. But yeah, like Richie's supposed to be a comedian. We'll get to the problems with that. What's Beverly's like character trait? She's a girl. That's her main trait. She's a girl. They gave her a bit more personality, I think, in the remake. In my own opinion, but yeah, that's her trait. She's a girl. So I picked Admiral Hodo because um, I didn't want another Marvel figure. I was going a bit. It was very Marvel heavy, very, and yeah, this is like mostly Disney actually as well. But hey ho, Eddie, like I didn't have a hypochondriac figure, but I had Baby Groot, who is a delicate flower, like the way Eddie is tricked by his mother. So I thought that thematically, it worked. Bill. Bill's defining character trait is that he has a speech impediment. So, Hulk. I didn't have Scooby Doo. Shocking, actually. It's very shocking I don't have Scooby Doo. Actually, I know I don't have Scooby Doo as a pop because it's weird and it looks funny. Um, Mike. Mike's defining character trait is that he's black. So, Miles worked there. And then Stan. Stan's defining character trait is that he's Jewish and he has curly hair, but I didn't have a pop figure that would represent that, so I thought Clayface, he's nondescript because he's the everyman. So yeah, that's what I chose for them. And we're going to represent it with my little Cthulhu because it's really obvious to anyone who's ever watched it that Stephen was very, very heavily influenced by H.P. Lovecraft. Um, and then Henry Bowers, I'm going to represent with the Eye Raptor because, like I say, I had a lot of superhero ones, so I thought let's mix things up a bit. So, what do I mean when I talk about the text being the problem? Um, well, that comes down to the lack of character development, I believe. Like, the book is this thick. I'm not exaggerating, it's like this thick. Um, but there's not much character development. It's very plot heavy. Very plot heavy. It's not like Harry Potter where we get like a chapter where the Losers Club are just sort of hanging out and doing their everyday thing. No, when we meet them, the trauma's already started, so we don't get that much time with them as actual characters prior to everything kicking off. We don't know what they're like in that case. We sort of meet them as they're being picked on and as they're being bullied, and so these become things happen to them, and we don't like. I think the remake was like, okay, the remake is infinitely better than the miniseries because the miniseries has a terrible, terrible legacy left behind. Right, I love Tim Curry. I love Tim Curry, um, but it's not good. Like the dad from Sister Sisters in it, and like John Ritter, he's in it. Um, the acting is fine. It's fine. It's just it's so obvious how low budget it's got, the miniseries, and the film. Obviously, the studio went, here, money. Let's throw lots of money at this, and that will solve all of the problems. But it doesn't. You see, so like I'm assuming if you're watching this, you probably know what happens in at least the miniseries, in the original miniseries. Just going to take a drink. Um, so I'm assuming that you know that. Now, like I said, just been to see It Chapter 2 tonight. And I went because I was really, really curious as to what they were going to do differently. Like how they were going to take a look at the original text, interpret that, and then make something visually interesting and entertaining for the big screen. And what they did was they pretty much just followed the book. So yeah, they do fight a giant spider in the third act, like it's a John Peters film or something. Um, but it's a clown spider, so it's a little different. Um, we're going to be getting our head of ourselves here. So, like, these are the problems with the text. I think can come down to the individual characters and lack of development. For example, Richie is supposed to be a comedian. Stephen King's not very funny. Um, Bless him. And so in the first half, when you have the child actors, like acting out the little kid playing Richie, the little boy, the Stranger Things boy, um, bless him. Like he's fine. He's fine. I don't get the feeling that the kid's a natural comedian and that can improvise, and that's not down to the kid. That should be down to the person what writes the script to give him some funny material to work with. Because when he had some funny material to work with, he was funny, but when the material was written by Stephen King, it wasn't funny because Stephen King isn't really funny. So yeah, and then like this is the same problem with Ben. Ben writes this poem to Beverly, who he carries a flame for, and the poem is, "Your hair is winter fire, January embers, my heart burns there too." It's a terrible poem. It's a really terrible poem. It's not romantic. For one, right? It's not a haiku. It doesn't follow haiku structure. It doesn't flip in rhyme. It's only got 3 lines. It's a really bad poem. Stephen King is not a poet. So Ben is not a good poet. So I find trouble, like, as a girl, like, thinking, oh, well, if I got that poem, how would I feel? And I'm like, I would be like, is this the poem? Did you forget to copy the rest of it? Like, what happened to the rest of the poem? Um, so like that is the problem, and this could be fixed. It might be sacrilegious to say it, but it could be fixed by somebody writing a better poem than the one that Stephen King wrote. But nobody did. Nobody did. They just go with the January embers. So she's a ginger, right? Okay. Yes, that's fine. So in the second movie, where they're all adults now, Ben is in love with Beverly. He's completely and utterly in love with her. It's not like in the miniseries when, Like, he's like, oh, I always had a torch for you, and they kind of hook up. It's, I love you, Beverly. I'm in love with you. You knew her for a month when you were 13, and then she moved away and you never saw her again for 27 years. You haven't seen this woman in 27 years. You knew her once for a month when you were 13. That's crazy. That's like me being like, oh, I'm totally in love with, trying to think of somebody who I was at school with when I was 13. I can't even think of their name. And it's not even been 27 years since I was in school when I was 13. But yeah, no, I can't even remember a boy's name of a guy I had a crush on when I was 13. Um, Let alone, like, I'm in love with you, Beverly. No, no, you're not. You had a thing for her. You had a thing, like, I've got no doubt that if I saw the boy I had the biggest crush on when I was in school, like the boy I had the biggest crush on, I'd still be a little bit, oh, oh, like the flame still burns a little bit, just a little bit. But I'm not like, I am in love with him. He is the epitome of man. No, there's none of that because I'm a real person. And this is why I have trouble connecting with the characters, because they're not real people. Like, Eddie's character trait is he's like this delicate little flower, and his mother keeps him like hypochondriacal and everything. Like, if they were going to keep that, like, play it up, this is the era of the internet. This is the era of WebMD. Why would you not take advantage of that and have the guy be like a really super hypochondriac? Because that's not in the original text, you see. It's just like, they actually did do one very clever thing, which was the actress who'd played Eddie's mother in the first film is playing Eddie's wife in the second film, because they heavily padded her out. She's not as big as, like, I'm a great big fat person, as Buffalo Bill would say. And, they padded her out a lot, and then they took that padding off and they gave her, like, a different hair. And, like, she's then playing Eddie's wife in the second one, which I thought was very, actually, like, very clever. That was like, yes, you go, guys. That's a great idea. But where, like, the second one I think falls down a lot is there's very little Pennywise in the movie. Um, there is so much to cover with the adults that there's very little time for Pennywise. And in the first one, it was very much like Pennywise and the kids, Pennywise and the kids, Pennywise and the kids. In the adult one, it's, and we are adults and we're going to wander around this town and reminisce and have some flashbacks. I don't know why I'm singing it. But yeah, like, and there's little room for Pennywise. Pennywise attacks a couple of kids, like a couple of people in the town, but they're not the main characters. Like, there's a very, very, like, interesting scene where he lures a little girl under the bleachers of a baseball game, and he lures her in, and right away this little girl is like smarter than any adult character in the whole movie, because she's like, you're a scary clown who's under the bleachers. I shouldn't be talking to you. But then he talks her around, and then he eats her. But, like, I was like, that was great. If only it was connected in some way to the main characters, because none of the main characters know about this little girl. None of the main characters know that the little girl dies. So it's like, it's pointless. It's like, if it's not going to affect the main characters, why is it in the movie? Because it's a scene with Pennywise, but there's not enough scenes with Pennywise with the kids. Similarly, Henry Bowers. Now, there's a reason I chose the eye raptor to represent Henry Bowers. At the end of the first movie, Henry Bowers is sent down a little well, and we don't know what happens to him. Because they cut a couple of scenes from his first movie where it shows that Henry not only killed his father, but he also killed his two friends in the car with him as well. They cut that scene. And they didn't put it back in the second one, which I thought led to it missing something. Now, the guy who plays Henry Bowers in the second one, I liked him. I liked him a lot. He had the right levels of just like a disturbed guy, a really disturbed guy. But like we spent a little bit of time with him in this asylum, and I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. Like the eye raptor, you're like, ooh, that's interesting. And then he escapes the asylum, and then we don't see him again for ages. And then when we see him again, you're like, oh, I forgot about that. I forgot about this thing existing. But then he's not very effective because he gets killed straight away. Like, the eye raptor is not particularly effective because you're like, oh, it's meant to be all of this stuff. Because it's the cross between the Rex thing and the thing, and it's just not very good. So Henry comes back into the movie to be almost immediately killed. The only really effect that he has on the main characters is he stabs Eddie in the face, but that doesn't really affect Eddie as the movie goes on. So one would question why bother have him in the movie at all. A change, if you remember the miniseries, Bill had a wife who Pennywise kidnaps. In the in the remake, Bill has a wife and she's in the film for about 30 seconds, and that is it. That's the last we see of her. Right at the beginning of the movie is the only time we see. Although there is a funny joke about Bill Denborough's books having really terrible endings, and I can't help but think that that's a little bit of a stab, a little bit of a at Stephen King, because he's very good at world building, not so good at the ending. So maybe that was a little little dig at Mr. King there. But yeah, Bill is present in the movie. I don't really feel like we get to connect with the adult characters. I mean, like Stan kills himself pretty quickly. If you've seen the miniseries, you know that that's what happens. So we don't really get to learn anything about Stan or who he is or what he's been doing with his life or why any of his friends should even care because they haven't seen him in nearly 30 years. So like why should they care? Like what effect does this have on the plot? Like there's a bit of a thing like where they should like Stan sends them a letter and it's like I knew if I killed myself it would bring you all together. How did you know this, Stan? You don't know these people anymore. It's so questionable. Like Mike's defining thing is that he's black. Like in the book and in the miniseries, I think they make a more thing about the racism in it, but they don't really in the remake. So that Mike is just there. He's just there. He's just hanging around, just being there. That's Mike being there. Like I really, I really missed Pennywise in the movie. He just wasn't in it enough. Like not even one of those like you just want more of that character. No, he just wasn't present enough in the movie for them to justify. You know, like the teaser trailer has the thing with the little old lady, with the funny naked walking thing. I'm telling you, right? If it was supposed to be creepy, literally the entire cinema is sat there laughing their asses off during that scene. Like there is no this is a problem with the movie in general. Actually, is that all of the scares are jump scares, all of them. There is no scary scene where you're like, oh my god, actually that's really disturbing. They're just all jump scares, which is, I'll tell you an example, right? So, Jaws: The Revenge has a very very scary scene in it. That when I first saw the movie, I was actually was only a little kid because I was obsessed with Jaws. Um, like it has a scene in the movie that is actually really scary, and that is it's right at the beginning of the movie, and the guy's on a boat, and the shark comes out, and the shark rips off his arm, and he's bleeding and he's crying and he's in pain and he's shouting for help and no one can hear him, and that was an effective scary scene. It was so scary to me as a small child watching this movie that I actually had to ask them to turn it off, and I had to come back to it like later. I wasn't able to sit and watch that movie, but there was like they could have done so much with that with Pennywise, and they just didn't. It was all jump scares. Like it was. I jumped. I did. I did jump because it's a jump scare. It's because you're not expecting it. It's not because it's scary. Um, which is it's a whole other thing. Like they have this scene where Ben and Beverly are like being drowned. Ben's being drowned in soil, and Beverly's being drowned in blood. And like Ben's going, I love you, Beverly, I love you," and like Beverly's like kicking in like she's like trapped in a bathroom stall, and I was like, this is the dullest near death scene that I have seen in quite a while, because it's like because you know it's not real. You know it's Pennywise messing with them. There are very few stakes in the movie. And again, I think that's down to the original text. Like Pennywise at the climax of the movie becomes a giant spider, um, and they kill it through doing the ritual of the chud, which I always wondered how you were supposed to pronounce. I always pronounced it pronounce. That's not a word. Um, I always pronounced it chud because chud is a word where I live that we use to describe chewing gum. So like, so someone would say like, "Have you got any chuddy?" Chud. So I always called it the ritual of the chud. It's not. It's chud. Oh, at least that's how I pronounced it in the movie. Ritual of the chud. They do this ritual, right? And it goes wrong because they explained it on screen. If you explain a plan on screen, it's going to go wrong. That's the rule. That is the rule. So they explained the plan on screen, so it had to go wrong. So you know it's going to go wrong. Um, but like, they could have done so much more with it. It's like you're sitting there and you're like, oh, they're doing something different. They're doing something different. It's not going to be a giant spider. It's not going to be. It's a giant. It's a giant spider. It's fighting a giant spider in the third act. Like, if you want to have a scary character, make them a scary character. Don't make them into something like that's a gigantic, monstrous CGI mess. This is why the giant spider wasn't scary in the miniseries, because it was a stop motion mess, but a mess it still was. Um, like how can people continue to say that Stephen King is the master of horror when it always falls flat, and it's always things with character development. Like that's the problem. He's like, I have a character and they're fat and that's their personality. I'll make sure to remember that so people call him fat. Don't forget now, he's fat. Don't actually expand on the character or how he feels or anything. Like Stephen King can't write for kids. Stephen King clearly grew up in the 50s because that's where all of his stuff is set in the 50s. Like, he knows what kids sounded like in the 50s, but he has no idea what kids sound like now. So the kids don't sound realistic. In like the first movie, they don't sound realistic. They don't sound like actual children. Um, like Richie's not funny. Which is a big thing when he's meant to be like, I'm Richie Trashmouth Dozier. I'm a comedian. Now Bill Hader was great casting because Richie's funny in the second movie because it's Bill Hader playing the part, because Bill Hader's really good at improv, and also like probably Dan Aykroyd's secret love child. Um, but yes, he's good at comedy, so Richie's funny in the second movie. But he's not funny in the first movie, but that's meant to be Richie's thing. Like, one of Beverly's things is that she smokes. That's not really a character trait, but they they do have her smoking a lot in the movie, which is something. I mean, it's not nothing, it's not much, but it's slightly more than Mike has. Because Mike just sort of stands there. He is present in the movie. That I think was the overall sort of thing, is like, hello, I'm a character and I was present in this movie. Um, and that's about it. If you've seen the original miniseries, you've seen the it chapter 2, but you've seen it with like a lot less Pennywise than you would actually want in the movie. I mean, what more can I say on it? It's it could be improved upon in many ways. Um, they could have given the characters a bit more in terms of actual character development and cut down on some of the erroneous plot points. Like, if Henry Bowers essentially wasn't going to end up affecting them too much in the long run, why did we have Henry Bowers in the movie? Like, I thought that in the first movie when Henry Bowers, like, he has his knife and he's got Ben against the fence and he's like carving the H into his tummy, I thought, now when Ben's a grown up, he'll have that like H scar on his stomach and this will connect the two characters. Did he? No. No, he didn't. There was no scar. There was no scar. It was there was no scar there at all. There was a Pomeranian. That was funny. This is the thing. The movie was funny. It was actually very funny. I don't think it was supposed to be funny. I think it was supposed to be scary, but it wasn't. It was just, it was quite funny. There was a lot of laughter in my cinema. A lot of laughter. Not much like or anything. Just the Paul Bunyan statue was weird. We could have done without that. It didn't really add anything to the plot at all. Also, something else that they added in, Eddie, Richie, they made Richie gay. So apparently in the fandom there is like shippers, like Richie Eddie shippers, who are really excited that this has happened. Um, I'm not against it. I'm just like, but what exactly did this add to the plot? Like, it's not reciprocated. It's fairly clear that it's not reciprocated. Um, but it didn't add anything to the plot. And Richie doesn't even tell any of his friends that he is gay, and he doesn't tell Eddie that he was gay. So like, it's another like, nobody knows about it. Like the little girl who got killed under the bleachers at the baseball game. Nobody knows about it. What's the point of having something in a movie if nobody knows about it and then actually it doesn't affect the plot at all at any point whatsoever? Like in the first movie, they have this thing where the friends fall out and then they don't speak for a while. But when we're in the second movie, they've got all these flashbacks, and it's a bit weird because they've had to de-age the children. Instead of doing the sensible thing, filming it all at once, when the kids were actually a certain age, they decided to film it like later when they came back to do the second movie. But the children had aged up, so there's a little bit of like uncanny valleyness to the kids because they've de-ageified them. And there's all this stuff that supposedly happened in between these two points, like Ben's in a classroom, even though it's the end of summer. When we meet Ben, when Ben and Beverly meet, it's the end of summer. It's the last day of school, right? But there's a scene where Ben's in summer school. I don't know why. And Beverly's there, and he thinks it's Beverly. It turns out to be Pennywise. Um, he thinks it's Beverly, but I'm like, but, but Beverly moved in with her aunt after the conclusion of the movie, and it was the last day of school at the start of the movie. So when when did this particular scene take place where Ben is with Beverly in the school, or he thinks it's Beverly, but it's actually Pennywise? But when did this take place? Because don't tell me that took place during the missing gap of July August. No, that definitely did not take place during the July August part. Like there's this thing of like they all go to the cinema together and they pile into a photo booth and have a photo taken, but none of them were speaking to each other at that point. So like they've got all these flashbacks happening to a point in time where the characters weren't actually speaking to each other. They did restore a scene from the first movie that was cut from the first movie where it stands bar mitzvah, um, and Stan had this great speech, really great speech about basically how his dad was a bit of a dick to him, um, and they cut it from the first movie. They restored it, but they cut a bit down. Still, it wasn't as effective in the second movie because it doesn't occur during the right part. But yeah, like Stan, they all have a token. They all have a token that represents like the past. Like Ben has Beverly's signature from the yearbook page. Beverly has the poem that Ben wrote for her. Bill has the paper boat that Georgie lost. Mike somehow has the rock that hit Henry Bowers. I'm somewhat skeptical of that. We'll go with it, but I'm skeptical. Eddie has his inhaler. It's not his original inhaler either, it's a token. Okay. Richie has a token from the Street Fighter game. Okay. Stan has a shower cap from a scene from the second movie, not from the first movie, from the second movie. So it feels even more disconnected because we didn't see this in the first movie. At least all the other stuff we saw in the first movie. We saw the paper boat. We saw the rock fight. We saw Richie playing arcade games. We saw him playing Street Fighter. We didn't see Stan with this shower cap. So like how this was meant to be Stan's like token, the thing that represented Stan in the ritual of the Chud, I don't know. And again, this I think is a problem down to the original text because there was a lot of thought put into like non-copyright infringing Cthulhu, but there wasn't so much thought put into the characters who you're supposed to connect with on a human level, i.e. the Losers Club. Yeah. It occurs to me that I could have done a TLDR and said it's like the book, it's not great. I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there who disagree with me massively, but like I think that I'm really actually looking forward to seeing Doctor Sleep because it seems to be a sequel to The Shining, the movie, not The Shining, the book. At least I hope so. But well, they've dressed the set very much like Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, so we'll see. We will revisit Stephen King after Doctor Sleep comes out. Unfortunately, like all these movies came out that I wanted to see, and I sort of missed them. So I've booked myself in for a couple of movies tomorrow. I'm going to try and fit in seeing both of them in one day, and we will see how that goes because they're off out the cinema as of Friday. So it's it really, which is why I wanted to see it today. Stephen, what am I going to do with you? Okay, I want to thank you if you listened to any of this long, rambly, like, it is crap rant that I had. Oh God, and forgive me for, like, not having any makeup on at all. I've just come out the shower. My hair seems dry now though, which is good. It was wet at the start. I had to wash my hair. I wasn't going to wash my hair, but I had to wash my hair because I had a hot dog, and I dropped the hot dog and gave my hair a bath in tomato sauce. So yeah, I had to wash my hair tonight because to get the tomato ketchup out, it's not that good for your hair unless you've bleached it and it's gone green, and then it can sort you out. Little tip for you. Okay, thank you for watching. I'm sorry that this was long and rambly and not much sense making, but thanks for watching anyway. Thanks.